Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating and, honestly, a slightly terrifying breakdown of a hypothetical modern conflict. We're pulling this directly from a recent analysis by Crayon Capital, and we're going to take a deep dive into the incredibly complex web of asymmetric warfare.
So we're exploring a theoretical scenario today that asks one absolutely crucial question. What happens when an overwhelming, instant conventional military victory just unravels? What happens when it turns into an unwinnable economic stalemate? I mean, how does the strongest military on Earth win a war it literally can't afford to finish? Okay, let's get right into this.
Section 1. The decapitation strategy and the illusion of total victory.
Now, the baseline expectation for this kind of conflict relies on a really classic military playbook. It's called decapitation. The idea is pretty straightforward. You kill the central leadership, the entire regime instantly collapses, and everyone can just pack up and go home. In this hypothetical February 2026 scenario, the initial strikes are, well, overwhelmingly successful on paper. At 6:45 a.m., the Supreme Leader's compound is struck. Within just hours, over 900 military targets are hit. We're talking radar installations, nuclear sites, command centers. By day 5, the Air Force is shredded, and 30 Iranian warships are completely destroyed. It looks like a total knockout blow. But jump ahead to week 4 in this timeline. Oil hits $126 a barrel, and the Strait of Hormuz stays firmly closed. So you have to ask yourself, how did a complete textbook military victory lead to a massive global economic crisis?
That brings us to Section 2, the reversal, martyrdom, and decentralization.
Here's where the underlying assumptions of that whole decapitation operation prove to be fatally flawed. The analysis points out a critical human element that was just entirely left out of the initial briefings. The 86-year-old leader, who already suffered from cancer, by the way, actually refused to take shelter. He stayed right at his desk with his family, welcoming a death that Shia Islam views not as a defeat but as martyrdom. So instead of the regime collapsing, a nationwide holy jihad is declared. Within just 48 hours, the military command completely decentralizes. Regional cells start acting completely independently, picking their own targets. It becomes practically impossible to decapitate a structure that literally no longer has a single head.
And there's a really brutal geographic irony to those initial airstrikes, too. The heavily bombed areas, cities like Tehran, Isfahan, and Tabriz, are actually home to the progressive, educated urban populations. You know, the very people who are most likely to support internal regime change. Meanwhile, the religious hardliners who are more than willing to fight to the death, they remain completely untouched, hiding out in the mountains. So the strikes essentially destroyed potential allies from within, while leaving the most dedicated ideological fighters perfectly safe and entrenched.
Section 3. Economic retaliation and exposing the Gulf's fragility.
Having consolidated power through this new decentralized command structure, the retaliatory strikes don't just target the U.S. directly. No, they surgically strike the seemingly neutral Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain. Now, to understand why these specific nations are targeted, we have to talk about the petrodollar system. This is the financial practice where Gulf states sell their oil exclusively in U.S. dollars and then invest those profits straight back into American stocks, bonds, and tech companies. The source analysis actually refers to this as the invisible scaffolding holding up the U.S. economy. These states are the true financial engine of American global power.
Plus, because these states hosted American military bases and actually opened up their airspace for the initial strikes on Iran, they instantly became prime targets. The retaliation is incredibly surgical. They hit massive, critical infrastructure, like the 5th Fleet headquarters over in Bahrain, the Aramco oil refinery in Saudi Arabia, and Dubai International Airport, which is one of the busiest transit hubs on Earth.
And this exposes a really fatal assumption in the region's urban planning. Places like Dubai are absolute engineering marvels, for sure, but they rely on a population that is 90% foreign workers. These expats are there on employment visas. They don't have some deep, unwavering national loyalty to the UAE. So the mere threat of drones hitting luxury hotels causes these workers to just pack up and flee. It completely halts the city's economy almost overnight. It's literally like just pulling the batteries right out of a toy.
Section 4. The global chokehold. Shutting the Strait of Hormuz.
The absolute most devastating move in this entire scenario is purely geographical. On March 2nd, in this timeline, the 21-mile-wide stretch of water between Iran and Oman is completely shut down by drone and missile threats. Closing this tiny, tiny maritime hallway has colossal impacts. I mean, it cuts off roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply. Just consider the dependencies for a second. Japan gets the vast majority of its oil through this strait. India gets 45%. China's highly dependent on it as well. This severe shock to the system is exactly what causes Brent crude oil to spike past $126 a barrel.
And this triggers what's basically a cascading failure. The strait closes, war risk insurance is canceled, and the global oil flow just halts. But here's the part that most people completely miss when they think about this scenario. It isn't just about the oil failing to get out to the rest of the world. It is about essential food, medicine, and industrial supplies failing to get into the Gulf. These are desert nations. They fundamentally cannot feed themselves without open shipping lanes.
Tanker traffic through the strait drops an unbelievable 81% in a single week. And this systemic collapse is hugely accelerated by the invisible mechanics of the insurance industry. Commercial ships need protection and indemnity insurance just to legally operate. When war risk policies skyrocket to an astronomical $5 million per trip, commercial shipping is crippled entirely. The tactical genius of this move is that you don't even need to sink all the ships. You literally just need to scare the insurance companies.
Moving on to Section 5, the asymmetric math and bankrupting the defense system.
Now we reach the absolute core of asymmetric warfare. This is the catastrophic financial and material imbalance between the two fighting forces. On one side, you have the Shahed 136 kamikaze drone. It costs roughly $20,000 to $50,000 to make, and they are pumping out hundreds of these every single month. On the other side, the US is relying on Patriot interceptors to shoot them down. A single Patriot missile costs $4 million. Think about that math. The US ends up spending up to $200 for every single dollar spent by the adversary. The adversary can build more drones in a single month than the US defense industry can build interceptors in an entire year.
But the thing is, cost and production bottlenecks are only half the nightmare here. The high mobility of these incredibly cheap drones completely outmaneuvers legacy defense systems. They launch from ordinary flatbed trucks that just blend right in with normal civilian traffic. That makes them incredibly hard to spot via satellite until they've already been fired. And their low-flying, small design often evades those expensive missiles entirely. Meanwhile, a Patriot system is this massive piece of hardware. It requires a 30-minute stationary setup, and it is completely visible from space.
The crucial takeaway from the analysis really boils down to this one stark reality. The defense industry profits from expensive weapons, not effective ones. The modern military-industrial complex was fundamentally built for Cold War deterrence, meaning the goal was to build the scariest, most expensive weapons possible so you never actually have to use them. It is entirely unequipped for low-cost, highly distributed asymmetric fighting. Creating a $50,000 drone interceptor doesn't make anyone a billionaire. Selling a $4 million missile? That does.
Finally, Section 6, the stalemate, a trap with no exit.
So 4 weeks into this hypothetical scenario, despite overwhelming conventional firepower, the regime hasn't collapsed. Instead, it consolidates under a new leader who flat-out refuses to reopen the strait. This leaves the globe in a total economic panic and creates an impossible geopolitical trap. If the U.S. decides to just cut its losses and walk away, the Gulf states lose faith in American protection forever, and that crucial petrodollar scaffolding cracks. But choosing to stay means continuously bleeding money, spending millions of dollars daily just to shoot down cheap drones. It is a massive, self-inflicted economic wound with absolutely no clear off-ramp. Ultimately, this scenario really forces us to confront the severe limits of conventional military dominance in the modern era. The source leaves us with a final, highly provocative thought to chew on. An empire founded by war has to maintain itself by war. What happens when an overwhelming show of force is met not by a matching conventional army, but by a decentralized, deeply ideological, and hyper-cheap asymmetric resistance? It's a fascinating, and frankly sobering, look at the reality of global conflict today. That's all for this Explainer. Keep asking questions, and we'll see you in the next one.